I think peer support workers should be seen as any other professional.
A peer can really help kind of diffuse the situation, put things into perspective.
Through going onto a cohort, it's like being in one big family. The role of a peer worker is there to support other peers, very differently from a clinical role or a support worker role.
When I was discharged, it seemed like the only thing that really made sense to do for me to sort of move forward. I didn't want to sort of go back to normal sort of 9-to-5 jobs, and I wanted to do something that had a real meaning and purpose.
What was really nice was that we're all learning this new idea about recovery, which is not often talked about in society. There's more focus on problems and illness and diagnosis as opposed to sort of strengths and recovery focus. And that's very empowering to learn about that for yourself and for your own recovery journey as well.
Often there are times when you can't get through to a patient, and actually a peer is much better at doing that than a kind of clinician. So they bring a lot of added value around having conversations which might be quite fraught, tense, and for a patient to know that here's a person in front of me who has himself had his life challenges but has managed to pull through, and is here now helping people. Seeing is believing, and so for patients it's great to kind of have someone on a ward or in a home treatment team knowing that this person has been on a similar journey to them.
A lot of people see the recovery language aspect of peer support about, being softly, but it's not about that. It's about just being kind, really.
I think what's really characterised the work that I've noticed the peer support workers doing is that the enormous sense of optimism, and how this kind of just infuses everything, really. From the outset, I always notice how peer support workers notice what people's strengths are.
Peer support, the easiest way for me to sum it up is that when I was at the worst times in my life, I think when I look back now, I can see that there was always a really healthy, positive part of me sort of pushing me on against the odds. And I think when I meet peers now for the first time, I see that in them straight away. And I think for me that's what peer support is. It's about seeing that really positive, glowing part of someone and helping them to see it.
A lot of the feedback I've had is that it's just a completely different way of being with somebody, and that sometimes it does help if somebody can understand where you're at that moment, and having been there, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you've experienced the same thing. It's just about understanding how challenging it can be.
I've got one peer support worker on my ward and just employed another 2. She's really valuable in terms of the recovery work she does. She's helped patients do individual recovery plans and looks at coping strategies and helps with education and learning. We as nurses can imagine how it might feel to be in hospital. We've never actually been there, and she has. She can really understand how it is for them.
And the fact that peer support workers are able to be open and honest about their experiences helps remove and reduce the stigma and discrimination which is associated with mental health challenges.
I think the other thing I've noticed about peer support workers is that they've never been frightened to ask a challenging question, and sometimes this has been really helpful because it's kind of given me a bit of a nudge to think about how I work and what it is that I can do that can make my work, my practice more recovery focused.
And a peer needs to understand as well that the reason they are in the team is to challenge. So the team's culture also has to shift to accept those challenges, otherwise it's not going to work.
My belief in recovery and how peer support plays a massive role in that is vital to thinking, well, I'm not just going to be a peer support worker that exists within that environment. I want to change that environment because it's what's best for peers. It's what people really want, as opposed to just following the guidelines that we're given.
Often within the professions, they'd see recovery as being able to have a life which they would consider fits in with what the rest of people want, not to do with what that individual wants. And I'm more interested in finding out what that individual wants.
I've also noticed how often peer support workers have been able to bring their own creativity and how that's contributed to their wellness, and in turn that's contributed to the wellness and other people's recovery journeys.
I think all the work they do is focused on recovery, so it's very proactive, very thought about, very supportive.
In the early days, people were quite sceptical about whether it would work or not, but it's worked. It's really, really worked, and we are now on cohort 8, which has just been fantastic for me, seeing so many beautiful people coming from the training through to graduation and then going on into posts either in the community or on wards within CPFT.
So I was a peer worker for about 4 years, and then I moved to an STR post. So it's still a support role, but just works slightly differently to peer work. And now I'm in a role which surrounds supporting staff to raise concerns within our trust. And it's very different. It's a very different role with a lot of different responsibilities. But what's good is I'm still able to use all the things I learnt on the peer training, and that's very much still part of who I am, and I can use that in everything I do.
Within our services, one of the things that we want to do is create a proactive space for our patients in which patients are self-determining in seeking help and support and leading a life beyond illness, a meaningful life. That's what we want to create. And in order to create this proactive space where patients are self-determining, they need to kind of reconnect with hope, kind of rekindle hope when hope's dwindling. And that's what peers can do.
So a peer approached me when he was leaving the ward and said goodbye, shook my hand and said to me that I'm an inspiration to him, and if I can do it, so can he. And to me that summarises what peer support is about. It's showing people that recovery is real.
So for me, what I've seen in this trust is that the Recovery College, being there, the light at the end of the tunnel, has actually meant that we have moved from, in the mental health world, a dependency culture to an independency culture, and that's got to be the way forward for mental health services.